Have you ever stopped to think who would truly be by your side if your life suddenly fell apart? Who would be able to stop everything to lend a hand when you need it most? This question resonates with us because deep down we know that we are often surrounded by people who talk a lot, promise a lot, but in times of pain, when we are fallen on life's path, their silence is deafening. And it is precisely at this point that the parable of the Good Samaritan becomes so timely, so vivid, so transformative, because it doesn't just speak of a wounded man on the side of the road. It speaks of me, of you, of all of us, who at some point have felt the weight of abandonment, the indifference of those we thought were close, and the surprise of receiving help from those we least expected. Imagine the scene: a beaten, bloodied man thrown to the sidelines, barely breathing, and as people pass by, no one cares. How many times has this happened symbolically in your life? Maybe not with wounds on the body, but with wounds on the soul, with marks no one sees, but which weigh so heavily that you don't know if you'll be able to move on. And in that moment, the nagging questions arise. Will those who claim to love me truly stay? Will those who seem to have faith, who appear spiritual, who preach care and compassion, act when the situation demands it? These questions reveal the essence of this story, an essence that goes beyond religion, beyond morality, and delves into the reality of what true love means in practice. The title you chose, The Good Samaritan and the Truth About Who Really Helps You, carries within it a weight of revelation, because we've all been deceived by appearances. We've believed that certain people would never let us down, and yet, when we needed them, they were distant, too busy, too cold. This parable reveals the truth that those who dress in spirituality don't always truly practice compassion, and those who are socially scorned aren't always incapable of demonstrating genuine love. There's a powerful force in understanding this, because it changes the way we see people, the way we relate to one another, and most importantly, the way we live our own faith. And this is where we need to pay attention, because this isn't just an old story, it's a mirror. Perhaps you're going through this exact moment right now, feeling hurt, forgotten, ignored. Perhaps you've sought help from those who seemed closest, but only found closed doors. And suddenly, the one you least expected appeared, perhaps a distant friend, perhaps even a stranger, and truly extended a helping hand. This forces us to reflect on life, on who truly walks alongside us, and on how we also act in the face of others' pain. And this is where the video begins to gain momentum, because it's not just about understanding the parable, but about delving into its deepest layers. Every detail carries a lesson. Every gesture reveals something hidden. Each character shows a part of our reality. And the most striking thing is realizing that the same question that echoed on that ancient road still echoes today. Who really stops to help you when you need it most? This is the question that will guide our journey from now on, and I want you to think about it as we continue. And if this question has already touched you, if at any point in what I've said reminded you of a situation you've experienced, or even someone who disappointed or surprised you, then I want to ask you something very important. Don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button now, because it helps this video reach others who also need to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a word, a single detail of the next stories we'll share here, because each one could be the answer you've been waiting for. And take the opportunity to activate the bell so you'll be notified whenever a new message is posted. This simple act of clicking, subscribing, and sharing is, in a way, being a digital Good Samaritan, someone who brings hope and truth to those who are hurt and in need of help. So, comment below if you've ever had an experience of being helped by those you least expected, because I want to read your story, and perhaps it will become an inspiration to many who will come across this page. When we look at the scene in the parable, we realize it's full of contrasts. The wounded man was there, fallen by the side of the road, in a state of absolute vulnerability, without the strength to get up, with no one to defend him, with only the hope that someone would pass by and show compassion. And who are the first to appear? People who, theoretically, should be the most prepared to help. Religious leaders, men who knew the law, who preached about love, mercy, and compassion. They were seen as examples, as spiritual references, as those who knew God's words by heart. heart, and yet, when the real-life scene demanded action, they looked away, quickened their pace, crossed to the other side of the road, and pretended not to see. This is the part that shocks us the most, because it shows how often there is a huge gap between discourse and practice, between theory and concrete action. Think about it. How many times have you also hoped that the very people you trusted most would be your support, only to find them nowhere to be found at the crucial moment? This creates a void, a wound even deeper than the one the man in the parable carried. It's the pain of frustration, the pain of realizing that the one who should have cared was indifferent, the one who should have extended a hand turned away. This shock is as real today as it was in that ancient story. The scene makes us wonder, what good is the appearance of faith without true compassion? What good are titles, positions, human recognition, if in practice the simple gesture of stopping and helping is missing? The parable exposes this contradiction bluntly, and it is precisely there that it touches the heart of every listener. Imagine what it must have been like to see a priest, someone with spiritual authority, walk by, glance quickly, and then move on as if nothing had happened. Imagine the feeling of abandonment, of invisibility, of realizing that you weren't worthy enough to interrupt your journey. And it didn't stop there. Another leader, also considered important in the religious community, soon repeated the same gesture. He walked by, avoided contact, avoided involvement. The contrast is stark and makes us wonder, was the spirituality of these people just a facade? Were they more concerned with their reputation, the cleanliness of their clothes, their social commitments, than with the life of someone dying right there in front of them? This part of the parable isn't just a critique of the past, it's a mirror for the present, because today a lot of this still exists. People who present themselves as spiritual beacons, who speak beautifully, who know verses by heart, but who deep down don't truly care. People who maintain an impeccable image before others, but who don't stop for even a moment to see the real pain of those around them. And how many times have we ourselves been victims of this kind of coldness, or worse? How many times have we behaved this way without realizing it, looking away to avoid getting involved, to avoid wasting time, to avoid committing? This contrast between expectation and frustration is powerful because it opens our eyes. It shows that help doesn't always come from where you expect it. And this generates suspense, generates reflection, even generates internal revolt. And this is where I want you to think with me. Who really helps you when you need it most? Is it that friend who always talks nicely on social media about empathy, but never calls you when you're feeling down? Is it that relative who claims to be so close, but disappears when you need company the most? Is it that figure you respect so much, but who deep down has never moved to ease the burden of your life? These questions are uncomfortable, but necessary, because the parable of the Good Samaritan is precisely about this, shattering our expectations and showing us the stark reality. And the reality is that, often, those we expect most are the first to disappoint us. And here comes a powerful key. The silence of those who pass by speaks volumes more than their beautiful words. Their silence echoes within us like an open wound. And that's why the story is so impactful, because it shows that true help has nothing to do with social standing, religion, or status, but with practical compassion, with real love that manifests itself in gestures. And perhaps right now, you're remembering people who've passed through your life and done exactly that. They were always there, but when you fell, they chose to walk away. If you've experienced this, I want you to share a simple sentence here in the comments. Write something like, "I've been left aside," because by writing this, you're not only venting, but also connecting your experience with the message of this parable. And realize how this affects us, because from the moment we understand that those who appear spiritual aren't always the ones who truly care, we begin to open our eyes to appreciate simple gestures. Perhaps the person truly willing to help isn't the person you expected. Perhaps it's someone unlikely, unexpected, even someone society despises. This is the point that prepares us for the turning point in the story, for the moment when the improbable appears, the character no one believed in, but who demonstrates in practice what true love means. And before we get into this surprising part, I want to emphasize, comment here if you've ever had the experience of expecting help from someone close and being surprised by someone else nobody expected. Use the phrase, "I was surprised by the person I least expected," because this will turn this video into a space for living testimony, where each comment becomes part of the message. Now hold on tight, because the scene is about to change, and what comes next is revealing, transformative, and will become the key to our reflection. Let's move on together to the next part of this story, because this is where the parable shows us something that can completely change the way we see those who are truly there for us when we need them most. Now imagine the scene with me even more clearly. After seeing two men considered spiritual, men of authority, men who carried titles and status pass by, someone emerges who, in the eyes of that society, would never have been expected to be the hero of the story, the Samaritan. And when we speak of Samaritan, we need to understand the weight of that word at the time. Samaritans were despised, discriminated against, seen as impure, as second-class people. Jews even avoided crossing their lands to avoid contact. They were targets of prejudice, rejection, and humiliation. In other words, if there was anyone from whom absolutely nothing good was expected, it was a Samaritan. But it is precisely in this contrast that the parable gains strength, because when everyone expected greatness from religious leaders and received nothing, the improbable appears and does what no one dared to do. Stop in the face of pain, look into the eyes of those who were fallen, and act with genuine compassion. The biblical text describes how the Samaritan, upon seeing the wounded man, was moved with deep compassion. This expression is powerful because it's not a superficial feeling, but something that arises deep within the heart, a compassion that involves emotion, action, a willingness to get involved even when it means wasting time, resources, and even exposing oneself to risks. He didn't just look, he drew near. He didn't just draw near, he touched, and not just touched, but treated the wounds with oil and wine, symbols of care, healing, and restoration. Imagine the scene, that bloodied, wounded, exhausted man, and someone whom society rejected, bends down, opens his own belongings, uses what he has to ease the pain of a stranger. This detail is crucial because it shows that true love isn't talk, it's practice, it's not theory, it's action. Now consider how this gesture provokes reflection. How many times have we been surprised by people who, theoretically, had no obligation to be by our side, but who nevertheless did the most for us? It could have been a neighbor, it could have been a distant colleague, it could have been someone you didn't even know that well, but who decided to care. This is the spirit of the Samaritan. He doesn't look at status. He doesn't ask where the person came from. He doesn't care whether they deserve it or not. He simply sees the need and acts. And this contrasts starkly with those who had every moral and spiritual obligation, but chose to remain silent. The Samaritan is the unlikely person who shows us that compassion has no labels, and the narrative continues to reveal even more detail. The Samaritan not only tended to the wounds on the spot, he made a decision that goes even further. He placed the man on his own animal, meaning he himself had to walk. This shows selflessness, shows sacrifice. And then he took the injured man to an inn, ensuring he received rest and treatment. More than that, the Samaritan paid the expenses, left funds for continued care, and even promised to return and cover any additional costs. In other words, it was not a momentary gesture, it was an ongoing commitment to the man's restoration. It is impressive to see how every detail of this action reveals the heart of true love for one's neighbor. Now, apply this to your life. How many times have you been lifted up by someone you never expected? How many times has help come not from those with a title, but from someone unlikely? Perhaps to this day, you can recall a simple gesture that changed your life, such as a kind word, an unexpected helping hand, financial support at a critical moment, or even a prayer offered by someone you didn't expect. These situations show us that God's answer often comes through the unlikely. And that is the power of this parable, to show that true love can be hidden where we least expect it. And here I want you to reflect even further. The Samaritan represents exactly what we need to learn to be. It doesn't matter whether society recognizes us or not. It doesn't matter whether we are applauded or ignored. What really matters is our willingness to act when we see someone fallen on the path. Because compassion isn't a fleeting emotion. It's a practical attitude, and that's what the parable teaches. I want you to write the phrase, "I want to be like the Good Samaritan," in the comments, because by saying this, you not only reaffirm this message, but inspire others to do the same. Notice how this moment in history brings an unexpected turn. The unlikely becomes the protagonist, the despised become an example, the unworthy become a symbol of true love. This turnaround is so impactful because it shatters prejudices, shatters expectations, tears down masks, and reveals the essence of genuine compassion. It's impossible to hear this part of the parable without being moved, without being confronted, without feeling within yourself the call to act differently. And the most impressive thing is that the Samaritan's gesture wasn't for applause. It wasn't for recognition. It was simply because he understood the value of life, the value of a soul, the value of seeing beyond appearances. And perhaps you're wondering, why did Jesus choose a Samaritan as the central character of this story? Precisely because he wanted to break the logic of the time. He wanted to show that it's not appearances that define someone's heart, but their actions. He wanted to teach us that in the face of pain, it doesn't matter if the person is rich or poor, known or unknown. What matters is whether we have the courage to stop, look, and act. This lesson is so profound that it still echoes in our hearts today, because all of us at some point are called to choose. Will we pass by like the religious leaders, or will we bow down like the Samaritan? And before we move on to the next part of this message, I want to ask you to share in the comments if you've ever experienced a moment when someone unlikely helped you. Write, "The unlikely helped me," because this will transform this space into a place of living testimonies where each story further connects this parable with real life. And don't forget, if this message has already touched you, leave a like right now, because this strengthens the channel and helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. Also, subscribe and activate the bell, because we still have many powerful messages to share, and I don't want you to miss any of them. Now let us continue together, because the next revelation of this parable will further deepen our understanding of what it means to truly love and show, with even more clarity, who is truly willing to walk by your side in the most difficult times. When we reach this point in the parable, we enter the part that most impacts our practical lives, because it's not just an ancient story, but a mirror that accurately reflects the situations we experience today. The truth revealed by the Good Samaritan is harsh, but liberating. Those who are close to us aren't always the ones who truly help. Those who say they love us aren't always the ones who will lend a hand when we're down. Often true help comes from where we least expect it, from unlikely people, from people who don't boast titles, who don't possess status, who aren't in the spotlight, but who have a heart willing to be moved with compassion. This is the shock Jesus intended to inflict on that crowd when he told this parable, and it's the same shock that resonates to this day in everyone who allows themselves to reflect on it. Think about your own journey. Perhaps you've experienced times when you expected support from those very close to you, family, longtime friends, spiritual leaders, trusted colleagues. You believed they would be the first to run to you. But when pain arrived, when life's wounds opened, when you were powerless to go on alone, they simply walked away. And to make matters worse, sometimes they didn't even say anything, just carried on as if you were invisible. This silence hurts more than words of rejection, because it reveals the indifference of those who should have cared. The parable of the Good Samaritan reveals exactly this. Appearances can be deceiving. Apparent closeness doesn't always translate into true help. And life often teaches us the hard way that trusting people can lead to frustration. But what's most striking is that In the midst of this frustration, someone no one expected appears. The Samaritan enters the scene as a symbol that true help can come from ways we never imagined. And herein lies the great revelation. God often chooses to use unlikely instruments to rescue us. He shows that it's not titles that matter, but a willing heart. He shows that it's not reputation that defines who will be by your side, but a genuine willingness to love. This truth is so powerful because it changes the way we see people, and even more so, the way we see life. How many times have you been surprised by acts of kindness from people you didn't even know? A neighbor who barely spoke to you, but who reached out in a difficult moment. A co-worker you didn't even consider close, but who, on the right day, made the right move. Or even a stranger, someone who crossed your path and did for you what no one else would do. This is the central point of the message. We cannot measure people's worth solely by their appearance or by what we thought they represented. True essence is revealed in practice, in concrete actions, in gestures that speak louder than words. This is what Jesus wanted to teach us with this parable. He invites us to reflect on who is truly there for us when we need them, but he also challenges us to look at ourselves and ask, how have I acted in the face of others' pain? Am I like the religious leaders who passed by? Or am I willing to be like the Samaritan, who spared no effort to demonstrate practical love? And this reflection becomes even more intense when we realize that life tests us in small ways. True help isn't always found in grand gestures, but in small acts that reveal compassion. A hug at the right time, a message of encouragement, an unexpected visit, a silent prayer offered by someone who believed you needed strength. The parable teaches us that true love manifests itself in everyday life, in simple actions, in the details that, when added together, can completely change someone's life. This is the revealed truth. Often the improbable becomes essential, while the expected proves absent. And perhaps right now, you're remembering situations where this has happened to you. Maybe you're thinking of people who always talked a lot but acted little. Or maybe you're remembering someone you never would have imagined, but who was used to bring comfort, strength, and restoration. If this has happened to you, I want you to write in the comments, "I was helped by the unlikely." This simple phrase can become a living testimony, showing others that the parable continues to repeat itself in our lives in different forms, but always with the same essence. And this truth goes beyond what we imagine, because when we understand that true help can come from where we least expect it, we learn to value people differently. We begin to see beyond the surface, beyond the image others project. We learn to see value in simplicity, in humility, in a willing heart. And even more, we learn not to depend solely on human promises, but to trust that God is capable of raising unlikely people to be instruments of care. This is the revelation that frees us from frustration and leads us to understand that we are not alone, even when those closest to us cast us aside. So before we move on to the next part, I want you to reflect deeply. Who was truly there for you when you needed them most? Who was the unlikely person God raised up to help you? Share this here in the comments, because your story may inspire others to realize that there are still Samaritans willing to move with compassion. Write, "The unlikely was my help," because that statement could be just the spark that touches someone who feels abandoned right now. And as you reflect on this revealed truth, let's move on together to the next point of this message, because there are still more hidden layers to this parable that will open your eyes to understand clearly what it means to be sustained by practical and transformative love. And when we reach this point in the message, we understand that the parable of the Good Samaritan was told not only to spark reflection, but to provoke a true transformation in the way we live our faith and spirituality in our daily lives. Because if there's one thing Jesus wanted to make clear in this story, it's that true love isn't revealed in pretty speeches, empty words, or religious appearances, but rather in concrete action, in practical gestures that have the power to change someone's life. The call that echoes from this parable is a call to action, a call to be the Samaritan today who isn't content to feel pity, but who stands up and decides to do something. This is the profound impact impact of this revelation, realizing that we are not just listeners to this message, but active participants, invited to put into practice the same spirit of compassion that marked the life of that unlikely character. True love is attitude, and attitude means stopping the rush of life to see those who are fallen around us. Attitude means giving up personal interest to offer time, care, and affection. Attitude means renouncing the indifference that often dominates us to choose to care, to choose to act, even when no one else chooses to. True spirituality is not found in positions, not in empty rituals, not in how many verses we know by heart, but in how we translate all of this into practice when faced with the needs we encounter along the way. Jesus showed through this parable that faith that does not manifest itself in works of love is dead, worthless, and fruitless. This is where the message connects with our reality. There is no point in knowing about compassion if we are not willing to live it. Now, I want you to imagine how your life could impact others if you started acting like the Good Samaritan. Think about how many people around you need help, but you often pass them by without realizing it. Perhaps they're suffering in silence. Perhaps they're facing battles they don't reveal to anyone. Perhaps they're emotionally, spiritually, or even physically broken, and your simple gesture could be the respite they so desperately need. A phone call, a message of support, an invitation to talk, financial assistance at a critical moment, or even a sincere prayer. These small gestures can turn into great miracles in someone's life. And that's exactly what being a Samaritan means, being a practical response in the lives of others. And this calling is challenging because it demands a daily choice from us. Choosing not to be like those who passed by. Choosing not to be indifferent. Choosing not to let the rush of life blind us to the pain of others. This is a call to be different, to break with the selfishness that dominates society, to stand up against the culture of indifference. The Good Samaritan not only saw, he acted. He not only felt compassion, he did something about it. And Jesus invites us to follow the same path. Being a Samaritan today means being willing to interrupt one's own agenda, being willing to get involved, being willing to bear the burden of others, even if it costs effort, time, and even resources. And maybe you're thinking, but I don't have much to offer. I don't know if I could make a difference. The truth is, the Good Samaritan didn't have everything either, but he offered what he had. He didn't have unlimited resources, status, or social recognition, but he had a willing heart. And that was enough to change someone's story. This is the transformation Jesus expects of us, that we do our best with what we have, because often it's not the size of the gesture that matters, but the willingness to do it. Genuine spirituality manifests itself in simple actions, but ones filled with love. And it's at this point that I want to challenge you to make a personal commitment. If this word has touched your heart, if you recognize that you need to live a more practical, more alive, more transformative faith, then write in the comments, "I want to be a Samaritan today." This public declaration is an important step because it shows that you're not just listening, but that you're willing to commit to a life of compassion. Also share if you've ever experienced situations where you needed a Samaritan and found help in an unlikely person. Write, "I found my Samaritan," because this testimony can inspire others to believe that there are still acts of true love happening. And remember, every like you leave on this video, every subscription to the channel, every comment you write is also a way to multiply this message and spread compassion digitally. By subscribing, you become part of this community that not only listens, but decides to live the word. So if you haven't already, do so now, activate the bell, and join this journey. Because together we can be light in the midst of darkness. We can be an answer in the lives of those in need. And we can transform realities with gestures of love. And most importantly, this call isn't for tomorrow, it's for today. Because there will always be someone along the way needing a look, a gesture, a word, an action, and you can be exactly that person. You can be the Samaritan God raises to show that true love still exists. So reflect deeply on this. Let this word sink into your heart and prepare for the next step on this journey, because we still have much to learn from the lessons hidden in this powerful story that spans the centuries and remains as relevant as ever. If you've made it this far, it shows that this message spoke to your heart, and that's why I want to extend a special invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel now to continue receiving transformative content like this. Activate the bell so you don't miss a word, and take the opportunity to leave a like, because it really helps bring this message to others who also need to hear it. And to prove you've watched to the end, write the following phrase in the comments: I want to be a Samaritan today, so I'll know you're part of this group willing to put compassion into practice.